You're listening to the Station 71 podcast with your hosts, Mario,
Beth,
Brian,
and Kirsten.
So this week we've got, I would say probably two news stories, but one of them we're going to take really in depth. So as always, let's start with the news and dive into the one topic we're going to briefly touch on. As I'm sure most people listening to this podcast heard, earlier this week, the Monorail operated with its doors, to use Brian's terms, ajar. I don't even know how to approach this story because, like, there's some bad to this, but I think it was one of those things that, like, while it is a safety issue, there's probably more to this that we don't know about. So basically, we got a minute video that surfaced on the internet of a family riding on the monorail, and we didn't see how they opened, we didn't see why they opened, but we saw that the doors were open on the monorail while it was driving, which is a very big safety issue, as I'm sure everyone's aware. But this could have been caused by plenty of different things. So what are your guys' thoughts on this before I just keep rambling about monorail safety?
I mean, I definitely think that it would be kind of startling if I was on it, but it's not something that I would, I guess, take as far as some of these news articles say, where it's like horrified tourist films Disney monorail, or like alarming video of monorail with doors open. And it's like, I feel like it's been made to be like some horrifying incident that it's, you know, I would say mildly like alarming at most. But
I would agree with that. If I were on it, I would probably be like, oh my god, that's not good, but I wouldn't absolutely panic. But I know a lot of people probably would, especially if you have like a little 4-year-old in there running around like a crazy person. I am really surprised that Disney hasn't done any damage control that I've seen. You know, I would think they would have come out with a statement and, you know, talk about safety and blah, blah, blah. But as far as I know, they haven't said anything.
Yeah, I think that was my biggest surprise of it, too, is that it was just something that happened. The internet went, like, outrage over it, and that was kind of it.
yeah.
But I'd be interested to hear what caused it to open, like, if someone was maybe leaning on the door, or if, like, you know, something happened. It's not the first time that monorail safety has been brought into question.
Mm-hmm.
But I really want the other details before I kind of, like, solidly form my opinion on if I'm angry about this or not.
Yeah, just to touch on the damage control aspect of it, I don't know if this is completely true, but what I heard was that this video was actually posted on a forum a couple days before it like really hit the news big. So Disney probably already knew that this happened, obviously, and it seems to me like they didn't necessarily want to talk about it to bring any more attention to it, because by the time that this had really hit the news sources and everything, apparently it had been on the internet for multiple days. So I think they thought that the best damage control would be to just let this blow over and hope a lot of people didn't find out about it.
I think they misjudged that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm reading, there's one article that I'm reading right now that says that a Walt Disney World spokesperson did provide a statement, and it says, quote, "We regret that this occurred. Safety is our biggest concern. We have taken steps to ensure it doesn't happen again." Also, one of the guests that was on the monorail gave some details about what exactly happened. So again, this is just according to one article, so don't, take it with a grain of salt. It said that they were traveling to Epcot, and after guests boarded, they tried to close the doors, but the doors wouldn't latch. And after a few attempts by a cast member to get it to latch, a maintenance team was asked to come over, and they spent about 10 minutes working on it until they got it to latch.
That sounds like exactly what happened to me when I was there, and we were delayed getting on the monorail because maintenance people were trying to make the doors on the monorail shut, and they wouldn't. I really wonder if it was the same monorail.
We were kind of talking about this beforehand, too. I'd be interested to see where we go from here. Like, building a monorail system or building new cars for the monorail is probably super expensive. Probably not something that Disney has in their budget right now, especially with Star Wars and everything coming out. They're doing a lot of construction. Mm-hmm. So I'd be interested to see if maybe we get, like, hand-me-down monorails for the time being, or, like, what the next step is in this instance.
I think Disney's kind of shown with some of their choices about this over the past couple of years that, I hate to say it, but I kind of feel like for the most part, the monorail's on its way out as far as improvements coming to it. They don't want to expand the lines, and I don't know, they clearly, like with stuff like this and other issues that they have, they don't seem to even want to put a whole lot of effort into maintenance, it seems like. So as much as I hate to see it go, it kind of seems like the longer this goes on, the less Disney wants to actually make the monorail like this pristine icon that it used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would hate to see it go too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would hesitate to say that it would completely go, because that would be a nightmare trying to get people to Magic Kingdom without it.
Right, but I mean, I don't think they're gonna put anything else into, like, expanding the routes. Like, I don't think we'll ever see it go to Studios or to Animal Kingdom, and I don't think they're gonna dump a whole bunch of money in, like, like a brand new generation of monorail cars. I don't see them doing much more past maintaining what they currently have.
I really wonder if the new system they're doing, the Skyway, is a precursor, or if that's a thought in their minds at all, replacing the monorails with that. I just feel like the monorail is so iconic, you can't do that.
I have heard rumors that they do plan to expand the Skyliner system once they get it online, but again, just a rumor.
I'm definitely not against it. The only thing I wonder is if that Skyliner can handle the kind of capacity of getting people from the TTC to the Magic Kingdom, because I don't think it would be able to, at least not from the concepts and stuff that I've seen of it.
And also, like, has it been confirmed that there are not air conditioning units in these? Or have they said anything further about that?
Oh, in the Skyliners?
Yeah.
I heard that there were. I could totally be wrong about that.
I also feel like we heard the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we heard the opposite, but that may have changed.
Hopefully, because that's not going to work if that's the case.
I don't know how there could not be, if it's like a gondola system where it's enclosed. I don't know how you could put somebody in that in July and risk them getting stuck in the air and not have air conditioning.
I feel like it'd be a nightmare if it wasn't.
I mean, that seems like like a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing was when they had the Skyway in Magic Kingdom, I was reading that it used to have to be shut down pretty regularly when there were lightning storms. So I wonder how that's going to impact this gondola system.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see the future of Disney transportation, because right now it's looking like we're gonna need it.
Yeah.
But that'll take us into our news story and topic of the week: Disney upcharges. This was all brought on by the recent announcement that, as it actually starts today, the day we're recording this, that club level guests will be able to purchase additional FastPass Plus reservations. This is another one of those very, very controversial topics right now. And we all kind of thought it'd be a good idea to talk about things that Disney has upcharged and introduced for a special fee, and how they either benefit your vacation, they hurt the system, what our thoughts are on them, and we're gonna try to talk about this and not just be angry Disney fans.
You know, going into this, I don't want to say this as like, I don't want to be here and I don't want to do this right now, but I'm always very excited to do the show every week. And like right before we started, I just kind of realized like this is the first episode I feel like I'm not like super excited to do, just because I know we're going to be touching on a lot of the negative stuff. And generally when I get to talk about Disney stuff, it's very positive. So kind of in a weird mood about this right now.
I also think it's a good time to kind of preface this and say that we're not saying that Disney should never introduce special things. I want to say right out of the gate that my philosophy with Disney has always been, if they're not taking something away from everyone else, it's not hurting the greater crowd. Right. So going into this right now, to start off talking about these fast passes, just to give kind of a little bit of a background on what it is, they introduced this system, and as of right now, it's still kind of like a testing thing, right? Like we're not confirmed that this is staying around. It was just kind of like a pilot program.
That's what they're calling it, is a pilot program, which who knows what that means. I think it gives them a way to back out if things turn south for them doing this. They can say, oh, it was just a pilot program. Or if, they end up going with it, it's kind of just one of those in-between phrasings that I feel like they're using to be ambiguous about it. Right.
So, as of right now, we have no idea if this is staying, if this is something that's just temporary. But the idea behind the system is that if you're staying club level at basically the highest tier you can stay right now, for 3 nights, you get the option to purchase 3 additional fast passes for $50 a day. Now, it's not 3 additional fast passes for your whole trip. That's 3 additional fast passes per day, which essentially means you get 6 fast passes if you pay this fee. You also get a couple other perks with it. Kirsten, I think you had all of those listed out, didn't you? Someone did. I don't know who that was.
Oh, it includes preferred viewing for nighttime spectacular activities, and one of the big pluses is those fast passes are good for multiple parks. You can park hop with those, so if you want to make one for Flight of Passage and Tower of Terror on the same day, you can do that, whereas a normal plebeian guest cannot.
So the other thing about this is that you do get, because I know this is one that we kind of were talking about in private, this isn't like the fast passes for people that are staying off property. You get to book at the same window. You get that 60-day window to book all of these fast passes, all 6 of them.
No, you get 90 days.
Oh, you get 90 days.
Yeah,
okay.
So you have 30 extra days compared to everyone else on property, and then 60 days compared to everyone off property.
Okay, so that was my mistake. So you actually get a head start on these FastPass bookings. So before we dive into this, let's touch on the fact that the thing that Kirsten was saying earlier. There were a couple articles that came out about the plus side of this. Disney is a business, and that is the nature of things, is that they have to evolve, they have to adapt, they have to introduce new ways to make money. We are aware of that. We are aware that this is kind of their way to draw in more cash while whatever. But that doesn't mean that we don't have a place to be upset about this in a way. And we're going to vent some frustrations. So this is probably the only time that I'm ever going to say this on the podcast. If that's not something you want to hear, if you don't want to hear us discuss some things that maybe we're a little upset about, this might not be the episode you want to tune into. So that said, how do you guys want to approach this?
Well, I want to preface, because I'm very upset about this, and like I get really passionate about it, but I loved it. Like, you know, above and beyond everything else, I love Disney World. Like all of us do. We wouldn't do this every week. Like you wouldn't spend the time recording. We wouldn't do the research and all this stuff if we didn't love Disney. But when you're passionate about something, sometimes you have like your own opinions on how it should go, and when things don't go that way, obviously it can upset you. So like I love Disney, and having, you know, negative opinions on, you know, one or two things they do doesn't negate that. And I feel like it's when you have a significant other and you're past the honeymoon stage and you start noticing all the things that annoy you. But it's hard to like be redeemed when you can't visit a lot. So when I'm there, it's like you don't think about that and you're so happy. But when you're not there, it's like that's what you notice most of all, is like the annoyances. So I'm going to try to like restrain myself. But overall, I love Disney.
And on top of that, like we're not saying don't go to Disney. Like we're not saying boycott because of this system. Like you said, we're here every week because we love Disney, and we're not saying that because we have these opinions, you also have them. We encourage you to form your own opinions about this. But this is just our platform to kind of say how we feel, and I think this is a very crucial time for us to kind of talk about maybe the future of where some of this stuff is going. But does anyone else have anything they want to say before we start talking about why we think this is not good?
Well, I completely agree with Kirsten as far as, you know, I'm not going to stop going to Disney unless something absolutely insane happens. But I think, like we kind of mentioned earlier, it's important to talk about, you know, some of the upcharges aren't bad. You know, if you've been listening to this podcast at all, you'll hear us talk about Not So Scary all the time and how much we love it. And if you're looking at it from the perspective we're going from, you know, technically that does kind of take away from a non-party guest because they close the park early. But I don't think it takes away so much that it should not exist. So I think a lot of these, you know, are very circumstantial, that not all of them are bad, but it's an interesting direction that Disney's going in that, you know, will obviously be affecting future guests.
Right. And on top of that too, a lot of this FastPass stuff, today is the first day it's coming out. We only got official confirmation about this probably 2 days ago. So we really don't know the ins and outs of this system. We don't know the greater effect that it's going to have as of right now. And I think that's probably a great place to start. A lot of what we feel is probably purely speculation, and it could potentially have the impact we think it will, but until the official numbers come out and until we officially experience this system from the perspective that we're going to experience this from, because I don't think any of us stay club level. Like, this is just, yeah, same. But this is how we're feeling right now, essentially. So who wants the floor first? Because I know we're all kind of chomping at the bit to actually talk about this.
So one other thing before we get started, and I agree with all y'all. I'm not very pleased about this, and this is also coming from someone who gets a lot of perks for being a Florida resident and a pass holder at Disney that, you know, that enables me to do some stuff at, you know, discounts that also allows me to do stuff that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. But at that point, I've never seen any of the stuff that I've been able to do as an annual pass holder or a Florida resident or as like a Disney Visa card holder that like specifically ate into someone else's experience at Disney like this does.
Well, let's talk about that then. So theoretically with this window and how this FastPass booking system works, you get that extra time for purchasing. So essentially it's incentivizing people to not only stay at one of probably actually the most expensive parts of Disney hotels, but to also pay the additional fee, which really isn't too much, to get those extra fast passes and book a little bit early. So essentially by buying this time on Disney property, you're granting yourself that extra window to get your flight of passage, fast passes, your Seven Doors Mine Train, the ones that are already pretty hard to get a hold of. Now, we've seen how the FastPass Plus system already kind of affects the game of touring Disney, and we kind of already talked about that, so I won't dwell on that too much. But we know that when the FastPass Plus system came out, we saw wait times go up for a lot of rides because of how the system worked. So I think a lot of our fear really stems from the fact that we've seen it happen when everyone had an almost a level playing field. Now that people that pay a lot more money have that field, it's like, well, what about the people that don't stay on Disney property all the time? Like, what about the locals that go to Disney World and get to only book on that regular window, or the people that, maybe it is their once in a lifetime vacation, but they just couldn't afford Disney property. They're all real situations, and, watching those extra fast passes go away because someone else paid a lot more money is kind of like, well, is that really the direction we're moving?
Right.
In my opinion, there are so many upcharges, and some have been around for years, the tours, that sort of thing. But I have a negative opinion of things that detract from the experience you get when you have a standard price of admission ticket. And I feel like this is going to detract from a person who has a standard price of admission ticket. And that is why it makes me so angry.
Right. And I was just going to say, the way that I kind of look at it is, and I 100% agree with you, Kirsten, is you need to look at the demographic. Like, who are they targeting with these upcharges? With, obviously with this new FastPass deal that they're doing, they're targeting like the upper class, like the elite. And that's not the average Disney guest. So it's like, I don't appreciate the fact that they're giving benefits to so few that will affect so many.
Yeah. And I'll use Brian as an example. This is why I think Magic Bands are such a double-edged sword. Like, they make it so convenient and so easy for us now. You can pay your room ticket, everything. But it makes them so easy to track your every move. And I feel like they're taking that information and not using it for good. So, like, using you as an example, Brian, like, you're a pass holder. So you spend a lot of money for your annual pass. You go to the parks on a regular basis compared to most people in the world. But you're probably not spending a ton of money when you're in there. Like, you have, you take your own water, like, you take snacks. So you're not buying a bunch of food. You're not buying a bunch of souvenirs. Like, maybe you buy, things you really want here and there, but you're not spending hundreds of dollars, in a weekend on souvenirs. But then, like, compared to a pass holder that lives far away, like, my doctor is a pass holder. She is a DVC owner. And she goes once a year. They own at Bay Lake. She's a doctor. Her husband's an anesthesiologist. I don't know their exact trips, but I'm guessing they're not doing anything in the cheap seats. And so they can see, like, what you're doing and how you're spending your time and your money in the parks. And then they can see what somebody of that demographic is doing and how they're spending their time and money. And, like, they want that person not in the line. That person is who they want to be in the stores, in the restaurants. But if you're in the line, what are they losing?
Exactly.
Right.
And I mean, I think everybody kind of knows that Disney World is not the same, even as a lot of the Disneyland theme parks, that Disney World is at its core meant to be a destination resort that people go to, that they know that the majority of their income and that who they are at the end of the day going to cater to are these people that are traveling across the country. A lot of them doing this once in a lifetime, maybe twice in a lifetime trip where they're going to, go all out, spend a lot of money to, get their worth out of it. So even though that's always been the case, though, with a lot of these upcharges and a lot of this stuff, and now I feel like it's kind of reached, the pinnacle of it, this FastPass thing, is Disney kind of showing that they are going to move more and more away from, catering to locals or to, everyday pass holders, and making this more about the people that are going to come and, make this a big trip.
Which I think is a really bad move in the long run. Kind of along the lines of one of the articles that we were talking about earlier. It's just that the people like us, even though we don't initially, like every single trip, we don't spend tons and tons of money because we know that you can bring your own snacks and water, and that you can order stuff on the Disney Parks app when you get home if you decide you want a souvenir. But we're going to spend the more money in the long run because we go regularly and we go more often. Whereas those people, those once in a lifetime, twice in a lifetime guests, they're spending a lot of money on that trip, but they're probably not coming back.
Right.
So I think it's a really bad move to stray away from giving benefits to regular Disney goers because, like, we're the bread and butter,
Yeah. And I actually, for the first time in my life, I sent an email to guest communications about this. That's how upset I am. And like I told them, because I've worked there, I know that they can look up my name and my history and see where I've, when I visited, how many times I entered the park, when I entered what park, where I've stayed, all that. And so I said, I've stayed on club level before. Like I've stayed in more of my stays have been in deluxe resorts than not. So I'm like a target demographic for this, and I will never buy this just because of the principle. And I think another demographic they're targeting is within that one-time guest, wealthy people who are used to staying, at club level, concierge level, at other hotels. But club level at Disney World is not on par with club level at another hotel. Like Disney hotels are themed really well, and but they're not, luxury hotels when you compare them to real luxury hotels. So I think this is like a thing that wealthy people who are used to staying at resorts like that and hotels like that are just going to throw money at. And maybe in the end, they don't even really know what it does. They don't even make their fast passes 90 days in advance because they don't know any better. But just the idea of, hey, I can get this perk and it's only $200 a day for my family. And to them, that's like chump change. So they do it.
Well, see, and that's the biggest thing about this to me is like, as far as I saw, the last thing that came out about this is that this perk was going to be available to pass holders too, which, like you said, I'm not going to do this just out of principle because I don't agree with it. But, they pass this off as it's like, oh, it's only $50, but, it's really not. Like when you look at the price point increase to stay in a club level room as compared to somewhere else, like they really are. I mean, it's not a $50 thing. Like if they made this and just said, hey, we're gonna give anyone the option that wants to pay 50 extra bucks to get the 6 fast passes, I wouldn't really have a problem with it. The issue is who they are. They're cutting almost everybody out from being able to do this that can't afford to stay in these rooms.
Well,
Right.
and then that's the other thing is like, if it doesn't catch on with club level, they're likely to not stop there. I would say their next step after that is DVC, and then the deluxes, like the article that Kirsten had linked earlier, which I'll try to remember to put that in the show notes. I'm really bad at that, so I can't make promises. But I think that's drastically when the big change would be, because like you said, what's the percentage of guests that stays club level, and are they actually going to be planning their trips to be like, oh, I get these fast passes at whatever, I'm going to go make them for all the best rides. Like, that's not who is really going to utilize this to the max. But plenty of people that stay on property that have the DVC and have the ability to rent deluxes, like that's when you're going to start seeing the changes, because granted, DVC members can go, with the amount that they spend, they can go that often, but they're also the ones that know Disney.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that are going to be like, okay, yeah, you know, I want to ride Flight of Passage this trip. I want to ride Seven Doors Mine Train. I want to do this. I want to do that. Like, they're the ones that are going to know which ride times are going to eat up the most weight, and they're the ones that are going to utilize it. That's not a bad thing if you can get that access. And that's where the real problem lies, is that, you know, obviously the people that have DVC can do that, but the people at All-Star can't. The people at Moderates can't. Like, that's where my biggest problem is. Like I said earlier, it's not a problem for me unless they take something away. And I think even if it's not much right now, they're effectively taking some fast passes out of that pool.
Right, and I think that's a good thing to touch on right now that you bring that up, is how this is going to affect everyone else. Because at this point, I mean, for people that aren't super familiar with this, it's just like we're complaining because rich people are getting something, access to something. It's really not that. It's that this is going to have a huge impact. I've said it on here before. It's very difficult for me, being a local pass holder that doesn't often stay on property, to get fast passes because I only get to make them in a 30-day window. So now I kind of feel like, I know it won't be to the extreme, but now the majority of everybody else is going to be kind of dealing with the same thing that I do, because they're going to have another group of people before them making it the 90-day. And you know, everybody that's making it at the 90-day is going to be making it for all of the big e-ticket attractions. Mm-hmm. So it you know, and like I don't want to complain about it, because like I said, I get to do a lot of good stuff at Disney, and it does require some extra planning on my part to be able to get decent fast passes a lot of the times. But I wouldn't want the average person that's doing this to have to like check on fast passes a lot and stuff like I do. Like I would want it to be easier on everyone, and I feel like that with this 90-day window is the biggest thing that I have against this, is the early access, because it's going to have a negative effect on a huge amount of people just because of that.
And that's more about the way that FastPass works, I think. And that's where my big issue with this comes, is that when, you know, we talked about this before, that when FastPass Plus came out, it effectively rose the wait times for a lot of attractions. And it wasn't because, like, you know, there was a bunch of different reasons for it. We'll leave it at that. But FastPass Plus is basically a pool of tickets. And if they have X number of tickets for 4:30 in the afternoon to ride Flight of Passage, you're essentially allowing people that spend a lot more money to go in, take a bunch of those tickets, and then you lower it down to the next tier. So you're separating your park-going guests by tier, which I think that's where my biggest problem is.
Well, and one thing, I haven't seen anything confirming this, and this is just completely speculation, but I have a very strong feeling that some of the ways that they have been releasing some of these big e-ticket attraction fast passes, like for Flight of Passage, where they've been holding some of them back and releasing some more a couple days later, I see that going completely out the window, because as much as I don't agree with this, I would hate to be someone that paid extra to get this 90-day fast pass window, not be able to get something that I wanted to get, and then find out that after the 60-day window they let out more fast passes. And I think Disney knows that, and I don't think Disney will do these like staggered releases of the fast pass. I think it's going to be, when that 90-day window opens up, it's going to be come and get it, they're all here.
And like you said, that's not confirmed, so
right.
we're not saying
complete
that's
speculation on my part, but I don't see Disney not letting the people that pay extra from this take full advantage of it, because I think the fallout from that, if they're not even getting like their full money's worth from this, is going to be even worse.
That's an interesting. Go ahead, Kirsten.
I was just gonna say, based on that, can I like talk about some numbers for a minute?
Yeah, go right ahead.
So,
I'd love to hear the numbers behind this.
Well, and the thing that for me, so if they wanted to offer concierge level or club level guests a perk, I think a better use of this would be a concierge vacation planner will contact you at, 65 days out. Find out what your priorities are. They will book your fast passes for you at 60 days and let you know what you have. But the thing about that is they have to pay somebody to do that. When they charge for stuff like these fast passes and all of it, like they're not prepared parking, that sort of thing. They don't have to spend any money on doing that. This is pure profit for them. And that's another thing, that it's just the history of this. And I don't know if I've actually said it on the podcast before. I do not like Bob Iger. I know that this is not all him, but I think that he has set up an environment for these kinds of decisions to be made. And I'll just talk about, for example, the dining plan. In 2007, it was $38.99 per day for an adult for a table service credit. You got an appetizer, an entree, a dessert, a non-alcoholic beverage, and 18% gratuity was included. In 2017, it was $69.35 per day for an adult. A table service credit included an entree, a dessert, a non-alcoholic beverage, no appetizer, no gratuity, and the price had risen astronomically. If the price had just risen with the cost of inflation, the 2017 cost would have been $46.78. So more than $20 over the price of inflation. And it's the exact same thing when you look at tickets, especially once they made the change and made the tier tickets to Magic Kingdom, where you charge more for Magic Kingdom than the other parks, and you charge based on peak, regular, and value one-day tickets. It's the exact same thing. And it's pure profit. And they're taking things away, not adding things. And that is, to me, where this is not a good path to be on.
Right.
And that's my spiel so far. I got more, but I'll stop there for right now.
Well, and that's my general feeling on this that I've said a couple times is like Disney can add things all they want. But once they effectively take something away, even if it's just a couple fast passes from that pool, it's something that hurts a regular Disney planner's vacation. I think that's where I start to draw the line of that's not what I deem acceptable. So I kind of want to touch on some of these other things. We can keep bringing it back to the fast passes, but I think with Kirsten's statement, that brings up a lot of different points that we have listed on here about a lot of the other additions that they've added. And I'd like to go over the good ones too. So if you're still here, bear with us. But I want to talk about one that was actually more recent because I keep looking at this on the list. But the start of this whole Disney let's add stuff, add in quotation marks, someone just highlighted it, and whoever you are, thank you. But the first thing that like really started to make me kind of feel this way was when they added the early morning magic hours and the after hours. And I think that was kind of, granted, it wasn't to the degree that this was. Actually, you know what? Maybe it was. I don't know. But when they introduced that, everyone kind of had this feeling of, oh, they're effectively taking away extra magic hours unless you pay for them. And I think that's where people started to kind of wake up to the realization that, like, yes, Disney does need to make some money, but at what cost? And I think that's where we're starting to kind of talk about this, is what is the cost that you're willing to pay? What are the things that you feel like should be a premium and what things shouldn't be? And I think stuff that's already been installed in the park, like the FastPass system or the extra magic hours, that stuff shouldn't be a premium price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to look at the value of it, because that goes back into what demographic they're targeting. Because you think of something like going back to Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. It's like, you know, depending on the day you go, it's $75 to $100, which is, you know, for a typical, like a family of four, that's a big chunk of change to add to your vacation. But it's a really, like, really quality and unique experience, which in my opinion is worth the extra money. But then you think about something like dessert parties, where it's like, really, like, are you really getting your money's worth with something like that for essentially, or like the Phantasmic dining package? It's like you're essentially getting food and a fast pass for a show for, you know, whatever it is, like $60 to $80. I can't remember off the top of my head. So it's like, I don't think that those kinds of things are targeted at the same people.
I see, and you kind of brought this up earlier, that technically the parties that we talk about all the time are a premium, that could be thought of in the same vein, but I disagree with that entirely. I think, while yes, they do close the parks early, they offer that difference in somewhere else. This would be kind of like saying, yeah, we're going to have a Not So Scary Halloween party, but all of the parks close at 7. Mm-hmm. If you look at park hours on every night of the week that a party's out, you have parks like Epcot that are open a couple hours after their schedule time. And I think that's kind of another thing, is like, yeah, you pay for that premium, but they compensate for it somewhere else.
Well, and my thought on this too is, you know, for the Halloween and the Christmas party, you know, entry is roughly the same price as a one-day ticket to Magic Kingdom. So if you're a person planning this, and you happen to be planning around a time when it's going to be on one of these parties, you know, you can make the decision. If you're going to roughly pay the same amount, you can say, okay, I can spend, you know, from the morning to the, you know, late afternoon in Magic Kingdom, or I can put almost that same amount of money down and go to the party instead. It's not one of these things where they literally wouldn't have the ability to access it without spending a lot more money than, you know, what they would plan. Which is why I'm completely fine with those, because basically the price point's the same. It's just, do you want the longer spread out day in the Magic Kingdom, or do you want the fast-paced party where you will probably end up getting to do about the same amount of stuff for the same price?
True. Yeah, and it doesn't, if you're going and you don't want to go to the party, you think it's too expensive, it's easy to plan around that and avoid that. You can go to Epcot that day, or go have a resort day. Like, there's a way to avoid having that negatively impact your vacation. And, like, that's why I'm okay with extra magic hours, because if they offered extra magic hours every single morning and every single night at every single park, that to me would be unfair. But it's easy to look at the calendar and say, hey, Magic Kingdom is having extra magic hours the morning, you know, that we're going to be there. Maybe we shouldn't go to Magic Kingdom that day. We'll go somewhere else, you know, to avoid that. But with this FastPass situation and some of these other things, it detracts in a way that you can't avoid with good planning.
Right, and like, I've never had an issue with the extra magic hours, because, I mean, yes, only people that stay on Disney Resort property get to take advantage of them, but I mean, you have to look at it. Obviously Disney's going to want some incentive for people to stay on their properties, but with, you know, with extra magic hours, anybody that stays anywhere on Disney property gets that perk, not just people that are spending, you know, insane amounts of money to stay at these very, very high level rooms.
Are there any other good examples of upcharges?
Are we talking bad upcharges, or?
No, I'm saying, like, because they're, like we said, they're not all bad. And so to me, I think the ones that add value without detracting, you know, we all agree. But like backstage tours, if they just keep adding those, and even if they advertise those more, like, those are so fun, and it's such a good way for people to really enjoy Disney, you know, and like find things about it to love. And it doesn't detract from anybody else's trip. So, like, why not, instead of this, have a new, you know, a different backstage tour? Like, there are so many things they could do that would be so good and so, like, positive, and wouldn't take away from someone who can't afford, you know, to stay at club level.
Well, not even just the backstage tours. A really good example of that is the minivans, and probably even the express buses. I would argue that they're both really good additions, because no one's forcing anyone to take the park transportation, which, some people are really against. I personally, I'll take the buses every time I'm there because it's free. But if you have the option to pay $20 extra for a minivan and you don't have to ride the buses or you don't want to ride the buses, that's something you can do. But that doesn't take away from me. Like, that would be like saying they're going to take all of the buses and make them express buses. And that would be where I would have a problem with it.
Yeah, I think minivans are a great example. Like, we took them, like, my dad is, whoever's doing all this research and planning these upcharges, he is their dream customer because he hates waiting. He has, like, enough money that he doesn't have to wait if he can pay his way out of it. Like, I guarantee you, if they had this $50 thing when we were there and he had known about it, he, like, would have wanted to buy it because he hates that. But, like, minivans, they don't hurt. And I will give Disney credit. They still allow Uber and Lyft and all that everywhere. They could be, just like some airports that are really greedy and really hard-headed and won't allow Uber in. So I do give them credit, for allowing Uber and introducing a, competitor, but not stopping those rideshare companies.
Yeah, I totally agree with the minivans and the park-to-park express service. And I was actually really sad to see that not continue because I used it on one trip and it was so convenient. And the price point wasn't even that ridiculous. Like, it was at the, like, when it finished, it was $19 a day or $29 for 7 consecutive days, which we were only there for, like, we only went to the parks like 3 or 4 days, but we still did the 7 consecutive days thing because it was going to be cheaper. And it made park hopping so fast and easy. Plus, you kind of, like, I thought it was kind of cool that you got to see some backstage areas that you don't normally get to see. But again, that's not taking away from someone else's experience. That's just adding to mine.
Right. And, we talked about some of these on our very first episode, if I'm recalling correctly, like with the Tomorrowland cabanas.
Oh,
that was... bring it full circle now. If everybody remembers them, they were the pop-up tents that were $650 to basically relax, and a lot of people were outraged about that, myself included. But in retrospect, they were here, they were gone, because obviously it probably wasn't as profitable as they thought they would be, but like that's an example of Disney doing something temporary. So we don't know if this whole FastPass thing is instated permanently. And I want to say this just because Beth brought up a good point that like the park-to-park transportation wasn't here permanently either. Disney does stuff like this all the time. So this could potentially just not be here in 2 or 3 months.
Well, and I get that, but I think Kirsten made the best point about this earlier that I think is going to make Disney want to keep this around is that it doesn't cost them anything. All this other stuff, you look at the minivans, the park-to-park, even the cabanas to some point, is Disney having to put money into something to have people be able to do this upcharge. I mean, this FastPass system is going to require some minor changes on the app, and they're going to have a huge profit off of this, I see. So
yeah.
I think in the end it'll depend on how many people adopt it, because, and I said this in my lovely email to guest communications, like, it doesn't matter like how much people complain, if they have a lot of profit from this and people spend money on this, they're going to keep it no matter what.
Well, like, and I mean, to go on what you said earlier again, like, I don't think that it will even matter if it's huge profit margins, because there is some profit margin without any real, initial cost for them to have to put in. They already have the app, they already have, the FastPass system in place. Even if it's not, very widely adopted and isn't used that much, the few people that do use it, they're still making almost pure profit off of that. So that's what really worries me about this, is that I know they're calling this a pilot program and that it's not necessarily a permanent fixture yet, but I don't from a business standpoint, looking at this in Disney's shoes, I don't know why you would stop.
Yeah, but even then, if, like you said, few people use it, it doesn't become as much of a worry as we say it is. Like, yeah, it is kind of a greedy cash grab, for lack of a better word, but if, let's say, you know, a handful of people actually do use this, it's not going to detract enough away from that FastPass pool, I think. It still does, and it still hurts, but I would say if it becomes something that's not widely used, then maybe it's not as bad as I would say. It's not something I would do, but it's not something I'm going to, like, you know, be mad about if it's not as big as we think it is.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of just word vomit, so I'm sorry.
And I think, I mean, in the end, and I've also heard the argument for adding these upcharges is the parks are so crowded, and they, you know, if they keep raising prices, but people keep going, and they want to get, you know, lower the attendance somehow, just so it's manageable. But to that, I argue 2017 attendance was down, revenues was up. Revenues were up. What does that tell you? But like, the only thing people can do, you know, we can talk about it all day long, but the only thing you can do is vote with your dollars. And if it ever reaches a point where it's so bad that, you know, people are saying, I'm not coming anymore, and they follow through with it, that's, I think, the only time they're going to start listening. And actually, that's what I said in my email. Like, I will not be back this year. I wasn't really planning on going back anyway, but...
Well, yeah.
But Disney needs to know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know I said earlier that, you know, out of principle, too, I won't do this. And honestly, if I haven't seen the specifics on how this is going to work out for pass holders, but for $50 for me to get 3 extra fast passes and have, in my case, an extra 60 days to book my fast passes, that's not that bad of a deal. If I'm not having to pay the rate on the room, like, I obviously wouldn't do it every time I go to the parks, but if there was a certain day that I wanted to, you know, hit multiple parks and try to get, you know, 3 e-ticket attractions at each park, that I could see myself doing this if this was open up to everyone. But like we said, like, because of the way that they're going about this and not allowing everybody to do this, like, I won't do it. Just because I would feel really left out if I didn't have the perks that I do as a pass holder. So
I don't know. I think this is a very bad thing. I've kind of argued for both points on this, but I want to see where it's going to go. I want to see what's going to happen next. The reaction to this was pretty intense. I've seen so many people mad and so many people upset. Not just us, but like people all over social media that I know go to Disney on a regular basis. And in the end, you know what? It's probably not going to hurt Disney's bottom dollar. And like I said to start this off, Disney's a business. That's what they worry about. So it's going to be interesting to see what the next couple, you know, months, years hold for these kind of things. But do you guys want to talk about any of these other ones? Because there's not too many massive ones, like too many big additions that Disney's done. I think this is probably the largest one outside of maybe the magic hours, the additional hours.
Yeah, I think this is definitely getting the most attention. I mean, I listed some of these other examples just to sort of show like the history, you know, this starting to happen, like the elimination of no expiration tickets. What does that give? Like, that's just pure profit for them. You know, gutting perks for resale DVC members, DVC, so people are less likely to buy resale, so they make the money from that. You know, and then you could talk about how they pay their employees. I mean, it's just a history that started in the past, in my opinion, 10 or so years that's not improving. And like, we talk about how they're a business, and that's true, but there are smart business people who love Disney, and I just don't know if those are the people who are making these decisions. In my opinion, if you love Disney, you want to share it. Like, whenever we help people plan trips, or even us sitting here talking, like, we want other people to love it. Like, you don't whenever people get back from their trip and you ask them, like, how was your trip? You want to hear good things. You hope that they experienced everything they wanted to experience and, enjoyed it as much as you enjoyed every time you go. And you don't want to keep it for yourself. And to me, this is just an example of continuing to keep Disney to a certain demographic and not have everybody enjoy it.
I wish that they, kind of going back to what we had mentioned earlier, I just wish they would focus more on, if they're going to keep introducing upcharges, like, focus more on experiences instead of convenience fees. Like, I feel like they're going to be making a ton of money off of these experiences. For example, Dive Quest, which I'm doing in a couple of weeks, is like $150 a person, and it does not include admission to Epcot. So that's a big chunk of change for someone. It's a smaller group of people, but it's a way to give people a premium experience that doesn't interfere with anyone else's trip.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wish they would focus more on stuff like that.
I think I agree with you, but I have to say that taking it from that approach is kind of taking it from the mindset that we all have. If this is your first time at Disney, are you more likely to pay for additional fast passes that'll let you technically get that quintessential experience that, I rode this ride that has a really high wait time, or, this and that, or are you going to go do a tour that's going to take 3 hours out of your day?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where it becomes like you can say, yes, that would be more beneficial to do experiences, which, from our perspective, it would be, because, not to say that I've done everything in Disney, but we've listed on here the attractions that we love and, the attractions that we've done. There's a very small margin of them that we haven't. And That's the thing. Like, you and I are more likely to go out and buy tickets to go do, like, behind the scenes tour or things like that, because we've done these things. And I think that's kind of the mentality behind adding more to the regular experience, or adding more to the regular experience.
I will say, I think if they advertise that stuff more, they really would rake in money from people like that. I mean, even if you just think about, most guests who come from overseas come for 2 weeks. They have special tickets for Europeans where you can get a 2-week ticket. And if they would just advertise, and even just like special events in the parks, like you can pay and not just have a wedding. Like you can, have a dinner on this stage at Beauty and the Beast live. And if they would advertise that, like what kind of, if there's an affluent family out there who wants to come to Disney World and they have a daughter who's like turning 16, do you really think if they advertise it and they knew they had the option of having like a party for her in Hollywood Studios after the park closed to everybody else, they wouldn't do that? Like, they would eat that up, but nobody knows about it. I mean, there are some backstage tours that they're adding that I don't even know about until I hear about them from someone else. Like, if they would advertise the scuba diving, people would love that. I mean, it's so cool. And, just nobody knows unless they're Disney aficionados. So I really wish, they would spend more on advertising those things, and then it would be a more viable avenue.
Right. I completely agree. I think that's a really great point, because I think a majority of the people that go on these once-in-a-lifetime trips are, like, casual Disney fans. They're not, like, hardcore Disney nerds like us. So, for example, going back to Dive Quest, like, my dad doesn't really care about Disney, but we're going on this trip next month, and he loves to dive, so he wants to do this. He wouldn't be going to Epcot on that day if it weren't for that dive. So they're getting that money from him because he's a diver and he wants to do that. It just happens to be at Disney World where we're already going to be. Mm-hmm. So I think that would apply in a lot of cases where, people that have other interests, like, if somebody's a really big, technological, they're really into the technology of it, I'm sure there's a tour for that they would be interested in. They just don't take the time to research it and therefore don't know about it.
And it's kind of a double-edged sword in a way, because you're catering to a lot of different niche personalities. Like, I'm not a diver. That if this was my first trip to Disney, that would not be something that I would be interested in. Or even if I wasn't interested in Disney, that's not something I'd be interested in. But I think they just have such a large demographic with the fast passes that's probably why it was scoped out this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, and like you're definitely right. I just wish it wasn't that way in the
Yeah.
And that's the thing that like really hurts, is like because it is that way and that's the way that we're moving, it's like, what is next? And I think that's where a lot of our frustration is from, is because it takes away something. In the end, that's what it does. And, you know, we're all kind of worried, like, where do we go from here?
Yeah.
So I want to ask you guys, two questions real quick. What are, besides this, are there any other upcharges you guys are not okay with? Even if they're something like, I don't know, something stupid, like you weren't okay with them adding the dining plan upcharge. And at what point would you say, I think I'm done with Disney? What do you think would be that breaking point for you?
Oh my gosh, that's a really sad thing to think about.
I know. I can go first, because I'll honestly say that none of the other upcharges, at least not the ones that we've talked about tonight or any that I can think of, really, I've been against, because like we've said over and over again, there's stuff that aren't taking away experiences from other people necessarily. So on you know, from that standpoint, I don't see anything wrong with any of these other ones, because I think that this FastPass thing is just on a completely different level. But yeah, the second part of that question is pretty sad to think about, that it might ever get to a point where I wouldn't want to go anymore because of stuff like this. And, you know, and this definitely isn't something that's going to keep me from going to the parks or anything. I do think it sets a very bad precedence, especially if Disney decides to keep running with it after, you know, a lot of negative feedback on it. But I would say that if Disney legitimately, like, tiered experiences, for example, if Disney started making separate tiered queues, I would say, for like different level resorts. That's just something I could think of off the top of my head. Like, this is kind of that on a much smaller scale, but you know, if it got out of hand and got to that point, I would say that would probably be something that made me stop going to Disney, because I just couldn't agree with that.
Even to make this a little bit more simpler for you guys, I know Brian got his answer pretty quick, but what would make you go to Disney less if they started upcharging for things, or, you know, what kind of experience would cut it back for you?
I'll say that I would definitely was not okay with. I'm not okay with more of the non like intangibles, like the fact that they no longer have the option to buy no expiration tickets. It's just it all it does is take away opportunities from people. It doesn't add anything, you know, except for to their bottom line. That doesn't even add a positive experience for rich people. It does nothing. Like the perks for the DVC members, the fact that the dining plan continues to get more and more expensive every year, the food quality goes down, they do free dining offers, so the restaurants are crowded. You know, that is another thing I'm not okay with. Definitely wasn't okay with the cabanas. That just seemed like a very obvious display of classism. It's like, can you pay to have somebody carry you around on a litter now? Like, I mean, that's what it seemed like to me. But anyway, and I think as far as me going less, like, this made me really reevaluate how often we go, because it's like, at this point, you can almost go, to Europe for the same price as a Disney trip. And I put those other experiences off in favor of going to Disney because I love it so much. And it makes this makes me think, like, why am I doing that? Because they clearly don't care about guests like me who, even though I do stay in like the higher end hotels and, I buy like the 4-day park hoppers and buy a lot, generally a decent amount of souvenirs and eat table service, like I'm still not wealthy enough to be their main target. So if like they don't care if I'm there, like why don't I just go somewhere else? And I did the math today actually to see I'll definitely be going to Disney World less. Like today I did the math to see how much it would cost to go to Tokyo Disney instead. And it's basically the same price. Once you see that their rooms are cheaper, their tickets are cheaper, the only thing that's more expensive is the flight. So I think this is kind of my breaking point of I'm not going to go out of my way to go every year anymore. I just, morally, if the only way I can vote is with my dollars, this is my breaking point.
That's very sad. I mean, like it is a very sad thing to kind of, I guess, realize that this is it. This is the point that tips a lot of people. And I will say that this was kind of a wake up call to what my tipping point is. I'm not going to say this is my tipping point because I'm still going to go to Disney. I'm still planning my next trip. Like I'm not going to just like, I do want to experience the other Disney parks, but I still have plenty of trips to Disney World that I want to take first. But I think like Brian said, if it becomes like, because I stay in a moderate, I can only book my tickets at this point, or I can only do this at that. Like this next trip that we're talking about going on, this would be the first time that I'm paying for a deluxe resort, and that's simply because I haven't been able to go in the last couple of years. So this is my splurge trip. This is the big thing for me. And honestly, the hotel has never been important when I go to Disney because I spend maybe a third of my time there, if that. And it's just, it's going to be interesting to see if it becomes, because I can drop the money on a very expensive hotel that I'm not going to spend all the time in, I get extra perks. But if it became that was the only way to tour Disney the way that I want to tour Disney, I think that would be when I would say I'm going to venture elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they keep defining the classes the way that they are to a more of an extreme, I think that would be my tipping point. It's not there yet, but I fear that it's on the way.
I think that was kind of my whole thing with this is like this wasn't my breaking point. I know that Kirsten said this was hers, if not.
And I'll interrupt and say that's today. Who knows what will happen next week? I miss it, like you miss your home always. But it's unconscionable to me to keep saying I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this. I'm okay with this.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's my thing is like this wasn't it for me. And like, yeah, I do disagree with the way that they're rolling it out, or that this is even a thing that they're talking about. But like, I think this was kind of what made me realize, like, okay, maybe Disney does view money more than the guest experience, which, like I said, their business, they have to. But that's always been my thing, is I've always viewed Disney as like, I can go to Disney World and it can be the same experience for me that it is for someone that makes so much more money than I do. And you go because it's the same experience. You're not like, oh, I wish I could do that because I don't have the money for it. Like, yeah, you do have some of those experiences with the tours and stuff, but for the most part, you can see everything in Walt Disney World for a base package. And like, yeah, they didn't fully take that away yet, but with the looks of it, that is what's coming.
Yeah, and I think the sad thing about this also for me is that it kind of made me realize that maybe there is a tipping point at all for me. Because I didn't think that there was, but I think it's possible.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to bring that up because I very distinctly remember when the early morning magic and Disney After Hours stuff came out. A lot of people were saying that was their tipping point. If that took away the extra magic hours, which was a huge perk to staying on site. And I want to kind of talk about this really quick. I know we're kind of running out of time, but I'm just remembering now that we talked last week about how Disney extended a lot of their own property perks to non-Disney resorts. So it makes it interesting to kind of see like that some of those benefits are maybe not as exclusive as we thought they were. Maybe some of those things that we took for granted because they were essential to our Disney trips aren't like, you know, they're not going to be as big of a thing as they were. Disney changes and evolves in so many different ways that it's hard to say like, you know, where it's going to go and what's going to happen, but you can always kind of look at what they're doing now as an indication of the future. And the last couple of weeks, we've seen a lot of changes to the, I guess, exclusivity and perks for staying on property. So I think when they finally decide to just completely restructure it and make it something that's based on where you're staying, that's when I have to say I need to stop going as much.
Yeah.
It's also very weird to talk about this because we're all in that unique situation where we don't all have technical access to this. Like, Beth, you don't stay on property that much. Like,
Once.
Your last trip was the first time that you've done it.
Right.
And Brian, you know, he's a Florida resident, and I only ever stay moderates unless my aunt's taking me and she's DVC. But, like, you know, even in the instance where Kirsten rents DVC points, you're never going to rent club level because what's the point?
It's really not worth. Like, if anybody's listening and they're questioning if they should stay club level, it has nothing to do with this fast pass crap. It is not worth it. Like, unless you're going to be there all day and you're going to like sit there and wait till they put new food out, and the snacks are not even that good. Like, it's not worth it. Like, it's really nice and fun to be like, ooh, club level, I'm going to go get a Coke and it's free, but it's not worth it.
It's not free.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we're hitting like a little over an hour. Is there anything you guys want to talk about this week before we tie this up? Anything positive you want to say, despite all of this frustration we're feeling this week?
Not necessarily positive, but not necessarily negative either. I hope that Disney is paying attention to the reactions that they're getting and that somehow that means something and will affect some sort of decision making. I'm not super hopeful that it will, but the optimist in me wants to believe.
Yeah. And, you know, I know we say it a lot, Disney is a business, and at the end of the day, that's what they do, but, you know, there's a reason that there's this podcast, and not just ours. There's tons of podcasts. There's tons of all this huge Disney community, and it speaks a lot, in my opinion, that Disney goes a lot further than being a business. You know, going to the parks for me as a kid was like, I mean, I know completely cliche to say, but you know, it's a magical experience, and it makes me sad to think that these price points can keep getting pushed further and further to the point where like a lot of kids won't be able to get that magical experience anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really good point, is like, you know, how many people tour Disney as a once in a lifetime thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even think about it as like your first trip on your own, like how much I very distinctly remember saving for my first trip with my friends, and like it took me that whole year to just save up enough money to go to Disney World. And I remember like feeling so happy about that because, like, you know, I got to go with my friends, I got to do it by myself, and I finally felt like an adult because I was paying for something on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, that's an experience that I never want anyone else to not have. Like, I want people to go to Disney, and I want them to have fun, and I want them to I want them to ride these e-ticket attractions because that's what's going to keep them coming back.
Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with that. My first trip that I planned on my own, I don't know if I said it on here before, it was the first vacation that I had ever planned by myself. And it was the first vacation that me and my fiance took together. And when we did it, it would have been hard for us to have done Disney much cheaper than we did it. We were both in college at the same time. Like we had to scrounge up, and it's like it didn't matter at all once we got there. Like it was the same like awe-inspiring magical trip that I remembered having as a kid. And that's, I guess, my biggest issue with this is that this is one of the first things that I'm seeing that is going to literally take anybody that had the same situation that I was in. Like once I got to the park, it didn't matter. We were in the park, we were getting to do the same thing as much as everybody else. That these fast passes are going to keep people from getting to experience as much with the money that they spend.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not even about like I hate it, but I look at it and I can understand. But I think about like families, who have saved for years to take their kids, and then their kids are there like, well, mommy, how come we can't like have a cabana? Like, how come we can't go to the front of the, like, it's just that those are the future Disney fans, and I think that they need to really think about what kind of message they're putting out there to all those kids that are coming today, and it's sad for them. Like, kids don't get it. That's not fair. Like, no kid should ever be at Disney World and be reminded that they're poor.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of playing off of that, one of the articles that we'll link in the show notes was kind of discussing this. Is you think about people like us, and Kirsten, obviously you already have a child, and that's you go to Disney as a kid, so when you grow up and you have a kid of your own, what do? You want to take them to Disney, but like these changes that they're making are going to prevent people from doing that, and they're like was mentioned a second ago, these future fans are not going to be there because they didn't grow up with that. They don't have that strong connection to it like kids that do go to Disney when they're young.
And I think this is probably a really good spot for us to kind of tie it up. But I want to say before we end our discussion that we still do love Disney. We're not going anywhere.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of the frustration that we have is because we love the parks. And it's hard to see something change like this. Yes, it may be the future, but, when they change things in this way, we're going to feel some emotion about it. And it's only natural. We'll see where it goes in the next couple weeks. We'll see where it goes in the next couple months, years, whatever. But Disney is always going to hold a special spot for us. And I think even though we've said, there is a tipping point now, we do feel some kind of tipping point. It's going to be a lot for us to stop. Mm-hmm. And that, like you said earlier, Brian, that's why we do this. We want people to love Disney. We want everyone to have that same experience. And it's only natural to be upset.
Right.
So this is us using our platform to vent our frustrations. If you've made it this far, thank you. We appreciate it.
We promise we'll be more positive next week.
Well, yes. And the other thing is, like, when we started this, I know I said this the first time that we had that giant, 12-person Google Hangouts Skype call. I never wanted this podcast to be just us covering the good things. Disney does have things that happen that aren't so magical. And when something happens, we have to talk about it. It's not because we want to be negative. It's not because we want to, Disney's now bad, you shouldn't go. Like, no, that's not the case. We love Disney, and that's why we do this every week. That's why we sit down, we talk to each other. But we need to talk about it, and we need to discuss where this is going and what the future is. So that said, we are potentially going to have more things like this if it ever happens. But
It's like a 90-10 kind of thing. 90% positive, 10% critical.
But like I said, I don't want to, for lack of a better word, pixie dust it. These things happen. We're going to cover them. We're going to talk about them. But we want to use this platform, the podcast, to discuss things in a creative way and maybe talk about why we feel the way we do. So this week, we're not talking touring plans and stuff like that. We did take the time to talk about this, so it's nice. I feel relieved. But that said, is there anything you guys want to talk about this week before we wrap it up? We don't have any.
We got
emails or.
Yes.
We did.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know if you want to. I mean, I'll read it. I don't know if you.
And
on that note, tell us how you feel. Like, I'm curious of other people's opinions. I've been reading all the comments on like the articles on Facebook and stuff. But hey, I like to read other people's opinions. And
definitely, and I would say that goes for every week, whatever our topic is. Let us know how you feel about the stuff that that we're talking about on here.
Oh yeah, I'm not gonna read that. I do appreciate the person that sent that email. I actually was thinking about cutting the music from the podcast because of that exact reason. I will address that just because there wasn't too much to say. But the person that did mention it, I don't want to call you out and be like, hey. So I'm not going to read your email. But I am cutting back on the music because it was getting a little bit too hard to keep it in sync with our audio and make it not sound too busy. I think I might still use it for our in-depth tours just to kind of add to the immersion, but I think that's probably about the only place that it's going to be from now on. Real quick, housekeeping before we get off the air. We've all talked about this, but I haven't mentioned it on the show. At some point this week, I'm not going to make any promises because I'm really bad at timelines. I will be uploading all of our backlog and future episodes to YouTube. So if it is easier for you to hide that at work, if you want to listen to podcasts on YouTube, whatever that may be, all of our episodes are going to be on our YouTube. So we will add that to our social media places that you can find us at the end of the show. Anything else that I'm missing?
Man, this episode got me real stoked about my trip in a few weeks. No, I'm still really excited, but I think that's all I had to say.
All right, and that's going to do it for us this week, guys. Thanks for joining us again on another episode of the Station 71 podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast at so you don't miss an episode. And while you're there, leave us an iTunes review. Let us know how you think we're doing. We'd be happy to read your comments on the show. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on facebook.com/Station71pod. We're on Twitter at Station71pod, Instagram at Station71podcast, and you can shoot us your listener emails at Station71podcast@gmail.com. We hope you enjoyed your ride, and we'll see you real soon.